When you look back at the last year, it's easy to see a series of just wild, high stakes events that seem to come out of nowhere. On the surface, it all looks pretty chaotic, right? Maybe even random. But what if I told you they're not random at all? What if there's a clear pattern connecting every single one of them? Let's start with what might be one of the most unbelievable moments of the entire administration.
We are in charge. Just 4 words. But this was Donald Trump hours after a military operation that absolutely stunned the entire world. And that one simple, powerful statement, well, it really sets the stage for everything that was about to happen next.
I mean, think about how fast this all went down. It's just breathtaking. On January 3rd, U.S. Special Forces literally seize a sitting head of state in his own capital. The very next day, Trump is on TV explicitly connecting that raid to his long-held desire to acquire Greenland. And then, just to make sure everyone gets the message, a top aide posts this map. The signal couldn't be clearer. What we just did in Caracas, we can do it anywhere. Okay, so while all this high-stakes international drama is playing out, something else is happening at the same time, kind of in the background. And that's this constant, relentless stream of information coming from the administration that, well, let's just say it often didn't quite line up with the facts. Let's look at this one, for example, from back in March of 2025. Lowest ever recorded. That sounds pretty definitive, right? A huge win. The only problem was, when you actually look at the historical data, it just wasn't true. Not even close. It wasn't just a slight exaggeration. It was a completely different reality. Or then you get a claim like this one. Now, information experts have a name for this kind of thing. They call it an outrage payload. It's basically engineered to make you angry, to get you fired up, and to get you to share it without even thinking about whether it's real. The truth of it is almost beside the point. And this one is a perfect example of another tactic entirely. The Paris Accord, you'll remember, was a non-binding agreement. But this claim takes that idea and, boom, it turns it into this giant, scary price tag. It's a masterful bit of reframing that creates a powerful reason to leave the accord, all based on a premise that's completely distorted. So here's where we have to ask the big question. Are we looking at two completely different stories here? One about a really aggressive foreign policy and another about a constant flood of falsehoods? Or are they actually two sides of the very same coin, part of a single unified strategy? To even start to connect these dots, you have to understand a concept called the fire hose strategy. Now, the point of the fire hose isn't to convince you of one specific lie. It's more like they're trying to drown you. You get hit with so many claims, so many contradictions from so many different angles that you just get exhausted. You start to think, who even knows what's true anymore? And that confusion, that's the goal.
And if you want to see this fire hose in action, just look at this number, 32. That's how many false or misleading things were said in one single interview. 32. At that point, fact-checking is almost useless. It's not about the quality of the lie, it's the sheer quantity that does the damage. The volume itself becomes the weapon.
Okay, but why? I mean, really, why go to all this trouble? If the goal isn't just about fooling people on any one particular fact, then what is the real endgame here? What's the point of it all? Well, there's this one framework. It's pretty controversial, mind you, coming from a group of mental health professionals. And they argue that to really understand what's going on, you have to look at it through a completely different lens than traditional politics. So here's their take on it. They say this isn't lying like we normally think of it, where someone tries to deceive you. They say the goal here is actually about dominance. It's a power move. The point is to say something that you and I both know is false, and then see if you'll go along with it anyway. It's basically asking, who are you going to believe, me or your own lying eyes? It becomes a test of loyalty. And they argue this whole thing works in a few steps. First, you test who's really on your team by forcing them to choose you over the obvious facts. Then, you show everyone how powerful you are by proving you can say anything, define your own reality, and face zero consequences. And what happens in the end? The very ground of truth that everyone stands on just disappears. And when that happens, your opponents are left confused, exhausted, and they basically check out of the fight. Okay, so let's bring this all back to where we started, Venezuela and Greenland. How does this framework explain that? Well, the theory makes a really specific prediction. It says that when a leader who operates this way feels like they're being backed into a corner or humiliated or that they're losing control, they don't retreat, they don't compromise, they escalate. They go big and create an even bigger crisis somewhere else. And what's so fascinating is, when you actually look at the timeline, that's exactly what seems to have happened. Those shocking moves in foreign policy in early 2026, they came right after a period of really intense legal pressure and political setbacks at home. The theory suggests that the chaos abroad wasn't random at all. It was a direct reaction to the pressure that was building up right here. And this really gets to the core of their whole argument. They're not trying to put a clinical label on anyone. What they're saying is the real danger is what happens when you take these kinds of predictable human behaviors, this need to dominate, lashing out when you feel attacked, and you plug them into the immense, unchecked power of the presidency. And it leaves us with a really chilling thought. What if the level of crisis we see on the world stage is directly tied to the level of pressure being felt inside the Oval Office?